welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I am your host, Jackson Keller.
And you know what? This week we didn't lie to you. We actually got around to watching Toy Story 4 because Jackson's theater managed to get it. What a concept.
My theater is pretty much all Disney movies at all times. It's really sad. It's like every screen is showing Toy Story 4, Aladdin, and Endgame.
Is there any movie out there that's not owned by Disney right now?
Oh.
It's because they're buying everything and it's turning into a monopoly, and it's terrifying.
Wait, was someone dig up Teddy Roosevelt, the trustbuster himself, to wield the hammer of justice from his Roosevelt skeleton to bust the monopoly of Disney and Steam while he's at it?
I'm trying to make a joke off the name like Thor and Theodore, but the problem is if you just take the TH from Theodore and put it in front of Thor, it's just Thor. So
Thor.
yeah, that joke is fucking nothing. We need to stop doing like joking openings. These fucking are terrible.
I mean, it's what the people come for. They need their daily dose of cringe before we get into the real questions, into the real shit. And we're talking about the realest shit because I am so invested in Toy Story as a franchise. The thought of a Toy Story 4, like many other people I imagine, after Toy Story 3's excellent conclusion to what we thought was a lovely trilogy, the thought of Toy Story 4 was offensive to me. And when I say that I'm invested in Toy Story, I mean that, like, Toy Story 1 was the first movie that I ever saw in the theater. Like, I don't even remember seeing it. Like little baby Jackson, my mom just took little baby Jackson in there because she wanted to indoctrinate him into the world of movies from a very young age. So I literally went out in public dressed as Buzz Lightyear all the fucking time. He was my hero. So needless to say, I'm very invested in Toy Story. I rewatched the first film on my way home from my Japan-Philippines adventure on a shitty 2x2, low quality screen on the back of a, airline seat. And it was still one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Unironically, the GOAT, hot contender for my top 5 movies of all time. Toy Story 1 is a perfect movie, and its sequels are excellent. I have not watched either of them since high school, granted, but I know that whether 2 or 3 is better can be a bit contentious. I was arguing about this with Haley as we walked out of the theater, but I love them both. These are both great movies. 3 was like a spiritual experience for me, going to see it with my parents when I was in my senior year of high school and watching like Andy grow up and give all his toys away. I am one of the many masses who wept openly.
I was gonna say, yeah, this is a series that like I don't have. I absolutely adore it. I remember these were also one of my favorite movies growing up. I have not watched any of them since high school, but I'm very much in the same boat of like that age group that literally grew up with these movies. We got older at the same rate as Andy, so like Toy Story 3 hit, and it hit hard. So yeah, Toy Story's kind of ingrained in us from a very young age. And then we got the reveal of Toy Story 4, which you get the kind of like, oh god, you gotta be fucking kidding me with this shit. And then it released. And I have thoughts and feelings, unsurprisingly. It's not bad.
I liked it more than I expected to. I was surprised that the movie wasn't totally like rehash, like money grubbing schlock. I think that the movie does have things on its mind, and it does have things to say, which is more than I can say for something like Finding Dory or Incredibles 2. So in that regard, I was very pleasantly surprised. I'd say I liked it overall, but I have very, very serious issues with the movie. I think it's easily the weakest of the series. That said, to represent the other side of the argument, I got in a very I mean, very heated argument makes it sound more heated than it actually was. But I saw this movie with recurring character on the podcast, lovely girlfriend Haley, and she absolutely loved the movie. She thought it was better than 3. So take that how you'll take it.
And lose all respect for her immediately.
Ouch, called out. I really want to rewatch 2 and 3.
Listen,
it's been too long.
I have a piece coming out on 25 years later, the day that this episode goes live, in which I vehemently defend Prometheus. So like, I'm in the boat. I can say things like that. All right, my credibility is shot as it is. It's gone.
I mean, we have gone to bat for Spider-Man 3, lest we forget, both of us, very intensely. But so representing the other side of the argument here, I mean, the movie's got like a 98 on Rotten Tomatoes again. It's still like, it has been overall very well received. And I would put myself, like, if I had to give it a rating, like I'm a 5-star scale man. I really oscillate between whether I'd consider this a 3-star movie or a 4-star movie, because the stuff that I liked a lot, and the stuff that I didn't really bothered me. I think I'd ultimately say that it has enough merit that I would put it in like the 4-star category and give it a recommendation. But that has many caveats, that has many asterisks.
Yeah, I say it's okay, and I think I do stand by that, but it's okay in the way that so many movies are okay now, in that if they're Disney helmed, they're going to be better than average, they're going to be pretty decent, but like it just feels like it lacks a lot of the punch that the first few did. It has its emotional moments, absolutely, but it doesn't have the emotional punches that I feel like I'm going to be marinating on for days. I walked out of the theater having felt a wide range of emotions, from sadness to happiness to laughter, all that good stuff. So like it does its job well in the moment to moment. Where it falls apart for me in a lot of ways is in like, if you step back and look at the overarching story and themes and ideas of Toy Story 4, it kind of feels lacking in a lot of ways. There's some internal conflict it's going through. There's some kind of strangeness to it, but I feel as a whole, if you just go into it and like, this moment was great, this moment was great, this moment was great, you're gonna have a good time. And I can't point to like one particular moment that was bad unto itself. Each moment works. It's just when you take that step back and say, well, let's put this moment next to this moment and actually think about them as a cohesive whole, that it feels wrong in some way. Which is why it is very easy to walk out of this movie and say, hey, that was fucking great. I had a great time. I felt everything. And honestly, I probably would have as well if I hadn't zoned in on something just due to where I am at emotionally. So like, I'm going to talk about that in spoilers because that's a whole big thing. But like, it is incredibly easy to walk out of this movie and go, every moment worked really, really well, and I loved it, and I had a great time with it. It's easy to miss the bigger picture in it, and I can't fault anybody for doing that.
So as for me, like, I thematically lacking is, I like that phrasing you use, because the words that I was thinking of was thematically incoherent, and that feels a little too strong, maybe, because it very obviously has ideas. It just muddles them.
I mean, yeah, it says here's the theme in the beginning, and it sticks with it through to the end.
Yeah. And so really, I think that what puts it like above average into like good like recommendation territory for me is that like there were moments where I got myself like feeling really teary and emotionally invested. And I think the difference though is that like Toy Story 3, it's occurring to me now, I'm pretty sure that I've only seen Toy Story 3 once, and it is burned into my memory. Like that, when I say that shit was like a spiritual experience, like I am not kidding. Like sitting there like in the theater with my parents, like watching this like culmination, this like coming of age tale, like come full circle. Like I've never weeped harder at a movie than at Toy Story 3, I think. And like, so that's a high bar. That's some powerful shit. Like I'm still thinking about that movie, like, 10 years later now. And Toy Story 4, it did get me to tear up. It did get me to laugh. It did get me invested in the adventure that was going on. But there is definitely, it definitely did not reach that level. It did not have the craft like perfection of the first movie, nor the like meta emotional devastation of the third. What I will say is that I think that, we'll talk about this a little bit more in spoilers, I think, but with Toy Story 3, as you had said, we were kind of the perfect age for that movie to hit as hard as it did. Whereas the metaphor that this movie goes for, without going too much into it, is more like older parent, like empty nesting. Like, what do you do, like, when your child who has come of age, like, is gone now? And, like, what kind of finding meaning in that? Which is good. It's very Toy Story. It's very new. It's definitely not a rehash of the other movies. But I think that just as someone who doesn't have kids, and even if I did have kids, like theoretically I'm old enough where that wouldn't be weird. It would.
That's a terrifying sentiment. Like,
I know,
not,
right?
Not just that you could have kids, but that we as a whole are in that age group. I don't like that.
I don't like it at all.
I made a crack about like 17 years ago, and then I realized I was 17 years ago, and I fucking turned into skeleton and crumbled.
So regardless of that existential dread, which I mean, it's appropriate because these basically are all movies about existential dread and purpose and shit. I think that, like, even if I did have like a kid, they would be like 2 or 3 years old at most. Like, someone our age who was part of the like Andy goes off to college crowd when Toy Story 3 came out would be in the thick of like raising a very young child. So I think the people who are going to get the most out of this movie actually are like people like my mom.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
It is kind of weird that it feels like it shoots for an age group in the first 3 and then jumps like 20 years.
I mean, I guess it's appropriate because, like, these are high quality movies, that they're the kind of movies that, parents can and will like watch and like get invested in with their kids. Like I said, I went and saw Toy Story 3 with both my parents, and they were just as much of a wreck as I was, if not more so. So like it makes sense, but it feels a little bit like, the age group that felt so much for Toy Story 3 got kind of left behind a little, because the themes are so much more directed at like an older audience, and like obviously it still has a lot of stuff that's more pleasing to kids. So us in kind of the middle ground are like,
Yeah. There's this movie. There's a lot to talk about. Is really what it boils down to, because like we're not even scratching the surface of what we want to talk about yet, and it's already kind of reaching that point of like, what the fuck is going on with the movie? Like, what are you trying to say with it?
Yes.
So yeah, this one's gonna be a big one, but we're not even ready to talk about spoilers yet, because we first, on the topic of like age differences and like jumps and scale, if you would. Jackson wants to talk about scale in this movie, and I get why.
Yeah, I want to talk about scale. As someone who has rewatched Toy Story 1 and has reasonably good memories of what Toy Story 2 and 3 were like. 2 in particular also being like on regular viewing in my VCR like back in 1998 or whatever.
Same.
So one of the things that makes Toy Story 1 so fucking good, that makes it like a perfect movie, is that it really commits to the conceit. It's got great characters, it's got, wonderful character interactions, solid themes that are surprisingly complex for a kids movie. Like Toy Story 1, it doesn't have sort of that meta boost that Toy Story 3 would have. Like, it has to say something all on its own in the context of just being another kids movie that comes out, and it works. It really does. There's a whole bunch of shit with like that conflict between Woody and Buzz, and who you want to be versus who you actually are, and like squaring that peg, like all that stuff. It's great, fucking wonderful movie. And one of the things on like a pure like moment to moment level that's so great is that you are never allowed to forget for a moment that these characters are toys. So, even from one of the things that makes it so great even today is that, they have this technology to make a full feature-length, 3D CGI movie, but it wasn't quite there yet. Like, everything looked kind of plasticky and shitty, so that's how the movie came about. They were like, well, let's make a movie about characters who are plasticky and shitty, and like that. So that's really great. That's a genius conceit, and it works really well. And makes it so that, obviously the CG is dated in Toy Story, but it's not so dated that it's, like, is a problem, except for maybe when, like, Sid's mouth is moving in a weird way. But, speaking of Sid, is that if you think about the central conflict of that movie, when Woody, like, conspires to knock Buzz out of the window out of jealousy to like reassert his position as like Andy's favorite toy, and be like the big man in the toy room. Like Buzz getting knocked out the window, and then Woody by extension, like following after, when he gets tossed out, is a big fucking deal. Like these are like 5-inch tall toys. They're not going to be able to just like walk into the front door. It's not just that, like, they can't let the humans see them. It's that their size makes it so that any like, time they want to travel to a destination is going to require a lot of maneuvering. Now, the movie does eventually, like, bend some of those rules, like, but it's after so much setup and so much payoff. It's after we've seen Buzz, like, leap from a hallway banister, thinking he can fly and like breaking his arm off in like a shard of plastic. It's after having to get rolled around in the back seat of like a Pizza Planet truck and get crushed by all the garbage that's in the delivery guy's like back seat. There's a real weight to the toys' movements and actions, so that when you have that triumphant moment, you have that really exciting finale of Andy's truck is moving and like we have to get back to Andy, and like we've escaped Sid's house, it's moving day, like what the fuck are we gonna do? That's when you get the payoff of the rocket that Sid was gonna use to blow up and not Andy to blow up Woody, Buzz, like being able to fly, and like it's a real like cheer moment when he like bursts out his wings and goes over the moving truck and leaps right into the sunroom. It's big, but it earns it. It gets there. And also, it's not that out of the question, because it's very clear that this moving truck is going like 25 miles per hour in a residential area and is actually moving very slowly. Now, what does all of this have to do with Toy Story 4, you ask?
Absolutely nothing. That was just a tear.
Yeah. So Toy Story 4, this was like the first thing in the movie that really rubbed me the wrong way. Is that there's a point when Woody has to go retrieve a character, and like they're moving on the road, and Woody turns to like Ham or whoever and says, "Hey, how far is the destination where this car is going? And the character tells him 5 miles, and Woody's like, oh yeah, I can make it there on like my 2-inch stubby legs on the side of this highway. And I'm like, what? What? Are you kidding me? And that's how the movie presumes to go on. It's not just that like characters basically teleport to where they need to be. It's that all the care to like make sure they weren't spotted by humans, and like a lot of the clever little visual gags of
the traffic cones, man. The traffic cones are burned into my brain.
And when Buzz is in like the pizza box and like the little like White Castle burger container, like all that shit. Yeah. No, like all that great stuff. This movie, it feels like, just throws completely out the window. Like there's a common criticism of a lot of kids movies is that they're just like a lot of noise, like a lot of movement to try and keep the kiddos entertained. And this one definitely feels like that. Like characters are just flying all over the place. They'll launch from like miles away without a second thought, and they'll just keep jumping around. And they'll do it in a really crowded carnival setting where there are people everywhere. And it gets to the point where like, how are these people not noticing that like it's red light, green light? Like they turn their backs and this toy that was there is suddenly like launching themselves like 50 feet across the room. It's I'd say it's a nitpick, but I really don't think it is. I think it is a matter of like having that being the core appeal of the movie, or at least the core appeal of the series established in the first one. Like it's not the sort of thing that would bother me as much necessarily if it wasn't something that the series had done so well up until this point.
It's something the series reveled in, honestly. Like that was the core element of the series. It's not even that it was doing it well as much as it was what Toy Story was. It's about these goofy small toys going on big scale adventures and having to hide, and like the wacky ways that they do it. Like sure, like that's not the thematic core of it or anything like that, but it's a very important piece to the story it's telling.
And it makes the tension really important, right? Of like so Woody in Toy Story 2, for example, like Woody has been taken by this collector guy. He's been taken by, Al, and they've taken him to Al's Toy Barn, which is like a couple blocks down the road. But in Toy Logic, that's like a nearly impossible task. They got to find their way to Al's Toy Barn, go on this whole odyssey across the neighborhood. It culminates in like an airport chase that's pretty big and like has them clinging like underneath like a plane,
literal airplanes.
Yeah, and like, but that's the thing, is that like Woody and the prospector and Jesse are getting sent off to Japan, where like he won't ever be able to come back. So I think that they've raised the stakes and like raised the action to the point where like, yes, it's big and it's out there, but like there's still that tension. But this movie, as soon as Woody is blasé about running like 6 miles down the highway, you immediately lose that. And suddenly one that was a big eye roller for me, I know that like Sean, this didn't bother you nearly as much, and this is not even close to being the worst example of this, is that a prominent character, in order to get around, like drives like a race car shaped like a skunk in broad daylight, and will just like plow through the road. And like it kind of works as a gag because the character in question is set up to be like kind of this like Furiosa bad bitch, but it's still a little silly to me. I was still a little like, I don't know about this.
In defense of that scene, I think it does work as kind of a continuation of the cone gag from 2, and that it works in a very similar way of transporting across open spaces. I feel like there are other scenes that work that they're trying to do the same thing, but they're just way more brazen about it. I think the vehicle works better than you give it credit for what it's trying to do.
Sure. And I guess just for like another example, there's like,
well, let's not dig into that. That's definitely a spoiler.
Okay, that's definitely spoilers. All right, that's fair. Are we moving into spoilers then?
Yes. Let's dive into spoilers before Jackson gives away the rest of the movie, because we're already definitely like toeing that line a little bit.
We're towing the line. That you're right. You're right.
So let's talk spoilers. But before we do, we're gonna be doing another live recording of Danganronpa V3 next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy. We're gonna have a special guest for that one. Will basically be like, here's all the things that you missed. So come back and hang out with us for that. There's a big Q&A at the end of it. It should be a grand old time. And yeah, come back for that.
And you'll have an actual expert on the franchise to listen to instead of our like smooth brain first impression. It's gonna be great.
It is. It's gonna be great. Danganronpa is a great series, and I'm very excited to talk about the finale for it. For now, though, let's finish up this Toy Story 4 stuff. Do you want to keep talking scale, or do we want to move on?
I mean, I think I made my point. I'll just go like with the example that I was giving. So the equivalent of like the airport scene is that, you know, the stunt driver character who is like a lost toy in the antique store because he didn't launch as far as like the kid thought he would in the commercial. That's a
Keanu Reeves.
funny
You
game.
know that, right?
That's Keanu Reeves.
That's Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
Duke Kaboom
sick.
is played by Keanu Reeves.
That's why he's Canadian.
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that. Sick. So Duke Kaboom, is that like, there's a big deal about like whether or not he'll be able to launch far enough in the antique store, which is already a little disingenuous because they're flying all around the antique store like at all times with customers around them and like the grandma like with her back turned and stuff, without any subtlety or regard whatsoever. So then when like they try and make the equivalent of, you know, the airport scene by having him do this big jump and have it be this character moment where he like believes in himself, it's just not nearly as impressive as even like Buzz Lightyear flying on the rocket, because, you know, that was one of Buzz's like, that's like an enlightening like apotheosis of his character arc, and he's a really important, you know, likable character for one. And, you know, Keanu Reeves, you know, no disrespect to Keanu Reeves, but Duke Kaboom is certainly not, you know, my main point of interest
He's
in
no
the film.
Buzz Lightyear.
Certainly. And so like it's just not as impressive of a stunt, but also like the movie has already like wadded up and thrown my suspension of disbelief into the bin. So like him making the jump from the Ferris wheel to like the carousel or whatever, it's just not that impressive. And also I was a little like, all the kids like look up and point at him like, wow, like look at him go, with like the streamer going across. I'm like, what is even going on right now? Like,
I mean, that's like the definitive scene of, hey, everyone should be seeing what's happening here, and no one has noticed this going on. So
yeah, pretty not my favorite element of the movie. It bothered me very consistently. Like in every scene, there was one or two moments where I'm like, your scales completely gone out the window. It never stopped bothering me, even when like funny emotional stuff was happening in the actual story. I found the execution of the action scenes, so to speak, in this one very lacking, very very lacking in subtlety that the series is known for.
Well, let's move on from the topic of scale then and talk more about Toy Story 4 as a whole, because like the core thing that we wanted to talk about with this episode is, does Toy Story 4 justify its own existence? Like, is this a movie that had a story to tell? Is it something that needed to happen, or is it something that they made and it ended up being pretty decent? I think like just as an opening argument on my side of things, I think like the movie clearly was made in a way that it necessarily didn't need to be made, but I feel like it's good enough that it's still worth seeing, and that might justify its existence to me.
So when I'm thinking about justifying its existence, there are a lot of different ways you can think about that, because I think ultimately I'm a pretty clean yes on this one. I think it does justify its existence, if only because, and for me, I think the threshold for what that would entail is actually pretty low, despite being such a huge Toy Story fan. Really, all I need it to do is have something on its mind, something to say, and not be a total rehash of the previous movies, which I think that by those standards, this movie clears. Now, as far as the execution of those ideas, certainly we can take issue with that, and we will. We definitely will. But you can say a lot of things about it, but I don't think you could reasonably say that this movie is just kind of circling the drain on old ideas. I think it does bring enough new to the table that even if the final product isn't perfect, I think that it feels like thematically enough of a interesting twist on sort of the like core like themes and identity of the Toy Story series that it's earned a place at the table. Now that it's at its place at the table, how does it measure up? I mean, I think it's the weakest of the three easily, but yeah, so that's my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think the movie itself is enjoyable enough just from like going in, watching it, spending an hour and a half or whatever it is, like just watching a movie. You're not going to have a bad time with it. And I think like there's definitely an argument to be made just in that it is justifying its own existence in those moments. It never feels soulless as so many could do. So that's, I think, as an early barometer, yes, this movie does find ways to justify its existence, but I don't know. There's still just chunks of it that like I feel like there's an argument to be made that even not having the same like cohesion that the originals do, it kind of diminishes that a little bit.
I think that's you can definitely make a solid argument about that. And in fact, I'm gonna help build this case because with that said, I do think that there are a lot of places where you can kind of see through the cracks, like very cynically, as far as what Disney's doing. Like one is more towards the end, and I kind of want to save that for later for our concluding discussion. But I want to talk about Buzz Lightyear right now, because I'm glad that you felt this way too, because Haley did not. Haley was like, "Well, Buzz Lightyear was always a Dumbo," but I feel like that what they did with Buzz in this movie was paramount to character assassination.
Yeah, they did Buzz dirty in a lot of ways. We were talking about it because I'm like, hey, so this is something like I haven't even mentioned anybody else because I thought like I couldn't remember seeing any of the Toy Stories as crisply as Jackson remembers one. But like I always felt that by Toy Story 2, Buzz had kind of come to grips with who he was. And like sure, he still had like the quirks of being a star commander, but he never really like reveled in it. He was never a true dumb. He was always he was a little slow on the uptake at points, but I feel like he became a full person as opposed to someone who is learning what personhood is.
I mean, more so than that, like if we think about Toy Story 2, and to clarify, to tie this in a little bit earlier, what I'm talking about is that Buzz's role in this movie is pretty much just go where the plot needs him to be, because Woody makes an offhanded comment about his conscience that Buzz doesn't understand, which is super weird for reasons.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, this is fucking bizarre.
Yeah, and he interprets his because the phrasing Woody uses is inner voice, and so that brings up a bunch of gags that I think are the weakest gags in the whole movie. Like I laughed and smiled a lot, especially like I particularly, as far as new characters go, enjoyed a lot of the visual dynamics with Key and Peele's characters, like the duck and the rabbit attached to each other.
Yeah.
But you know the jokes with Buzz, like pressing his little speaker voice box buttons and being told what to do by his finger quotes inner voice, didn't really land as jokes and were pretty transparently just like give Buzz the excuse to go where he needs to be. Like it was literally a progress the plot button.
So clearly, yeah. Like it's literally he lucked into everything in this movie and it kind of drove me nuts. Like luck as a storytelling like mechanic to move things forward can be done in like a tongue-in-cheek fun way, but like this just felt so clearly go to the antique store. Wow, that was convenient. Cool.
he ain't no Nagito. He ain't no Domino. So, but like going back to your point about Buzz being a full person, you're absolutely right. And more so than that, like if this was Toy Story 2, if this was his characterization, like he was still coming to grips with it, I might be able to buy it if this were like the second movie. But the thing about the actual Toy Story 2 is that Buzz is the man in that movie. Like he's the guy like leading the expedition, and like the guy who has to go and convince Woody that like he's making a mistake by, you know, fucking off to Japan or whatever. Like not only that, but like they go out of their way to illustrate how far he's come by having the other, like, you know, factory new model of Buzz Lightyear in Al's Toy Barn doing what he did in the first movie and him being really embarrassed about it. So like, yeah, like that isn't, it's completely inappropriate. Like, yeah, Buzz is a bit of a meathead, but it, like by that point, by Toy Story 2, certainly, like, I don't remember as much how he acted in the third movie, but, like, he's Woody's best pal. He's the second in command. He's the guy that, like, they look up to in Andy's room when Woody isn't around. And so that's the fact that they...
I mean, they kind of do that here, though, too. And, like, the part that kind of is the true kick in the nuts is that they do look to Buzz immediately, like, you're the second in command. What do we do? And he goes... I have no fucking clue.
Yeah, I mean, literally, like all the other characters.
He was surprised that they asked him to do this. Like, it's never happened before.
Exactly. And like, you know, he doesn't do anything that his stupid plot progression button doesn't tell him to do. Like the purple haired doll whose name I don't even know, like she says and does some stuff. Like Jessie goes and like, you know, pokes out the tires when it looks like the family's about to leave, but Buzz just goes where the plot needs him to. And when I say that it's cynical, when I say that I'm seeing some like Disney corporate cynicism here, what I mean is that they sat down and they said, okay, so we have this story about Woody. We're going to incorporate Bo Peep, who's basically a, you know, completely new character. Like, she was in the first two movies, but it's been long.
Totally revamped her character.
Yeah, it's been long enough that since we've seen her, that, like, all that really matters about her previous character is that she had kind of a thing with Woody. And otherwise, like, yeah, basically completely brand new character. You know, you have Gabby, you have the Forky, you have the Key and Peele stuffed animals, like bunch of new characters that they're focusing on, which is fine. In fact, I applaud that. Like I like that the movie isn't a total rehash. But then they're like, well, hold on. So if this movie is about Woody's like kind of fatherly empty nesting crisis, what do we do with Buzz? Like, he's such a popular character. We can't have a Toy Story movie without Buzz. So they just had him do what the plot needed him to do without any consideration for him as a character. And this isn't just me, like, you know, being like mad that they did my childhood hero Buzz Lightyear dirty, although I am mad about that. I think that there's a moment at the end of the movie when Buzz and Woody are saying goodbye. Like, Woody decides he's gonna go like live in toy outer heaven with Bo Peep. And you know,
check
Buzz
off
is,
your
you know,
bingo boards.
Check off, you know, I got it in there, boys. But so like, you know, Woody's gonna go off with Bo Peep and like live a full like independent existence, and Buzz is gonna, you know, hold down the fort with the other toys, and that should be huge. Like, these characters have come so far, like especially because of how nasty they were to each other and like the original and their genuine camaraderie that develops. This should be some touching shit, but because Buzz isn't acting like himself or even like a character at all, really, like, I didn't feel that much when they're like saying their goodbyes, and that's really disheartening. Like, that should have been Toy Story 3 levels of devastation to me.
I mean, on the topic too of new characters and the purple haired doll that we just don't know the fucking name of, it also muddles the idea of what this movie kind of wants to be. Because when we start the movie, it definitely feels like this is going to be more of a passing of the torch. Like, this is going to be the last adventure of Woody before passing the torch onto these new toys and literally passing it on to a new generation of toys, letting kind of Buzz and Jessie and all of them fall into more of the background of the story, which I feel like would have actually been a really kind of interesting idea for a narrative if you want to kind of do the soft reboot of Toy Story. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. But it's clearly kind of setting up this like passing of the torch when Woody bounces in front of the purple haired doll and just like, hey, this is things, and she's like, no, go fuck off. This is my thing. Go away. And so like it's clearly feeling like that's where it's going, but then instead, it's just not. Those new characters, aside from Forky and the Island of Misfit Toys in the fucking antique shop, are just non-characters in any way, shape, or form. Like, the only person I know from those new characters is the Tyrannosaurus, or not the Tyrannosaurus, the Triceratops, because it's played by Christian Shaw, and I like Christian Shaw a lot. So that's the only thing that it stands out from them for me at all, which is just a really weird with how the movie begins to set things up.
Yeah, it's so strange, especially because 3 made such a to-do about, like, this being kind of the new crew. Like, Andy's kind of culled a lot of his toys over the years, so we only have the core people like Rex and Ham and Slink and the Potato Heads and stuff. And now we have kind of these new characters to fill in the gaps, but they're really, really underutilized here, and I don't really know them, so...
Yeah, like, even the actual passing of the torch, when Woody hands his sheriff's badge off to the next leader of the toys, he hands it to Jesse, which, fine. Like, I get the idea behind that. But, like, it should have gone to that purple-haired doll, obviously. Like, a relinquishing of his power by saying, like, I understand that this is not my thing anymore. This is not our thing anymore. This is your kid. We are newcomers. You were clearly in charge here. It's not Jesse's turn.
I mean, it's just a weird conceit all around. Like, I don't know what was up with that moment, especially because Jesse's barely in the movie aside from like poking.
Yeah, she stabs
RV.
the fucking RV tire, and that's it.
Like, I think they're trying to implicitly put her as like the new favorite, but like as we've seen, like Bonnie's favorites, it's not like Andy, where like Woody was like, always the guy. Like, that was the central tension in the first movie, but every movie after that makes it clear. Like, you can see at the end of Toy Story 3, Andy's real hesitant about giving up Woody. But he ultimately does it. Like, Bonnie is obsessed with like a fork that she made out of garbage, and that's funny and that's hilarious, and Forky was a fun character, but like it feels a little hollow when like clearly her, at least at this point since she's still so young compared to Andy, who seemed to be a little bit older, like her favorites keep shifting like at the drop of a hat. So it's the kind of thing that doesn't square with the logic of the movie super well.
It's kind of like a bunch of mixed metaphors, which is the next thing that Jackson wants to talk about. I have a big thing coming. Jackson, I know, is kind of front-loading this one. I have a whole big thing at the end here.
I'm giving the real shit to Sean this time. So yeah, this was my big problem with the movie. In that I had mentioned before, and that like. So one of the I'll say this, I've been pretty down on it, but like I would rank this above like other Pixar sequels, and I'll give a little bit of praise. And that I think
one of our buddies described it as No Cars 2, and I went, all right.
That's amazing. But so one of the things that I think works really, really well as an emotional through line is Woody's like dadliness, for lack of a better word.
It is next to godliness.
That amazing. So Woody's godly dadliness, the daddy factor on Woody is pumped up a lot here.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's especially heartwarming, seeing him kind of like trying to show Forky the ropes and really take care of him. Like, it really mimics like, trying to keep a really young child out of trouble. And it's funny as far as that metaphor goes, even if it's not something I can really appreciate as someone who's going out of their way to try and get to the grave without ever having children. But as far as like a progression of his character from being kind of like you forget how nasty and like petty and jealous Woody is in the first movie until you go back and watch it. So like watching this one after seeing the first one so recently, it's really heartwarming to see him come so far, and feels like a natural progression of his character. And that sort of like crisis of faith about like what he's supposed to do, like knowing that as far as his role like that's another thing that's weird about the passing of the torch is that his role in Bonnie's room is already like clearly diminished. Like there's no real torch to pass, which is because Jesse has already sort of usurped him.
It makes sense from like a visual metaphor for the viewer type of thing, but
right,
it is like actual context. It is nothing.
She really didn't need him to legitimize her, but whatever. So but like that conflict, and then like Bo Peep's like surprise return, and like what happened to her, I thought that was real inventive, like being full on like toy, Furiosa, like exploring the wastes and getting played with children, and driving around in a silly mecha skunk, and their conflict over how to handle this loss of their kid, which Bo Peep experienced much earlier. Like I thought all of that stuff was really, really strong. Like I really like their characters, I really like their interactions, and I really like
it does sound like you're talking about, like when you say the loss of their kid, it does kind of sound like some sort of like terrible death of a child. And I was like, did Woody and Bo Peep have a kid?
I mean like that's true. Like that seems kind of silly, but also, I mean, that like not that the movie is so glum about it, but like Woody, like when Woody talks about Andy, like he does kind of talk about Andy like it's a kid that he lost.
Oh no, I mean absolutely. I just thought I was more just making light of a moment that I caught there. Like there is absolutely a reading of this movie that could be made in which that does make sense, but.
Absolutely, we got to have the memes. We got to bring the memes here. But yeah. So, and I think, like loss of a kid, or more realistically, like I'd mentioned earlier, I think that this movie will resonate really well with like parents of kids who have grown up and kind of moved on, because that's like Woody's like struggling after having so much of his identity be wrapped around Andy and like taking care of Andy and watching out for his well-being, knowing he doesn't have that same place in Bonnie's room and trying to make it work. Like that's some really potent stuff, and I like that decision to ultimately go off with Bo Peep and sort of find his own meaning. It's a real like existential like confidence booster of like Woody's gonna go out and be kind of be his own man. I mean, I think that's great. I think that's a great
that works as a resolution really well.
So when I say that, but getting into kind of the negative side of things, when I say that like it's thematically lacking or incoherent in some places, what I mean is that central metaphor of the child toy relationship being like parent and child. Sometimes the movie will try and play that relationship less like parent and child and more like a romantic couple when it's convenient to the movie, either for like a point or making a joke. Like obviously there's some romantic undertones between Woody and Bo Peep, which is weird that they're trying to be so coy about it, because like Bo Peep was macking all over him at the end of the first movie.
I was gonna say they definitely kissed. Like I was thinking about that afterwards. I'm like, especially because early on too, like it just feels like the more I think about it, there's just like a bunch of what feels like cutting room floor moments. Because, like, that whole, Woody jumping in front of the purple-haired doll feels like there was a whole storyline with that got cut out. And then, like, them being all coy with it. At one point, she's like, Woody, we can't, in a way that sounds like there was another person in her life. And then there's just not.
Or like the little cop lady who's like, oh girl, like you gotta move on from him, and like so they talk about Woody like that in terms of like a romantic relationship, which is fine because that's the undertone, even if it doesn't really match with what we know about the characters. But sure, it's been long enough that I'm willing to let that go.
Yeah.
But then there are other times where like that same sort of framing, they'll frame Bo not having a person as kind of like a bad breakup, or her like not being over her ex or something. Or it's made really explicit when they're gonna have Gabby talk to the like lost girl, which was a great scene. I did tear up at that scene. But like immediately before that, when she's talking like, oh my god, like what if she doesn't like me? Like she's talking like a high schooler about to ask like their crush on a first date. And it's weird because that's not at all the metaphor that's been resonating with the movie. And it makes it feel like they had a lot of ideas for how they're going to present the toy child relationship, even though like the empty nest one makes so much more sense with what we already know from the previous movies, but they're still introducing all this other stuff, seemingly only because Woody and Bo have like sexual tension, which is a weird sentence to make about a porcelain doll and a cowboy.
That was the weirdest fucking thing.
But yeah, when I talk, and there's I don't want to harp on it too much because Sean, you have other like more like real deal shit to say, but like that's kind of what I mean when I say the movie mixes its metaphors and it's kind of incoherent. It's not like Toy Story like 3, and like think about Toy Story 3. Like the reason that hit an entire generation like a truck is that it couldn't be like more clearly presented as like a coming of age, like boldly stepping into a scary new future and like making the best of it. Like it couldn't have been more clear and concise and coherent on that front. And this movie, it has the ideas to justify itself, but it doesn't have that same tightness that the previous films did.
Yeah, it all kind of it's as I said, it works really well in that moment to moment where like the scene with Woody jumping from the doll, like the conversations where they treat the kids as almost like, you know, a bad breakup. In those moments, in those scenes, it works and coalesces with everything else that's going on. But as soon as you take that step back is when the whole thing kind of starts to feel a little bit weirder. Which is what I'm gonna do with Gabby's character. Because as soon as they introduce Gabby as the main villain, and her whole core ethos is that she is struggling with the fact that she was born defective, that she was created with a box that doesn't quite, a voice box, very specific there, that doesn't quite work. There is, I mean, the quickest and easiest reading of this is to describe it as, you know, quote unquote problematic would be like, oh, well, you know, it's kind of ableist, which is like when I was explaining this idea to Sam, like why it really wasn't what I wanted it to be. She's like, oh yeah, it is kind of ableist because, like, you know, it's saying that like you won't be loved unless you're perfect. There's a reading there, and it's certainly very easily defensible, and I totally respect everyone who would read it that way because it's there. But I think beyond that, it hit me in a way, and like I'm still kind of working out my identity. I'm obviously, if you follow me in any capacity, very much working on my persona, I guess, my online persona, trying to get some traction on the things that I do. Like I write, I stream, I do the podcast. And so like when you have those moments where you're not gaining traction, it's really disheartening, and it feels like you want to give up because there's something about you or what you're doing that isn't quite connecting right. And you're like, if I can find it, if I can fix it, everything is going to be great. And so like the couple days leading up to this movie, I was in a deep funk, very much related to just the inability for me to gain traction in those ways. And it was not great. I was in a bad place. And so like when they introduced Gabby and it was like, hey, here's this character that's kind of like, it's not a one-to-one parallel, but like I can easily draw themes from what's happening there and, you know, put them in my own life. Just like, cause it felt like it was building up into this idea of like loving yourself for who you are, loving what is quote unquote broken about you, loving the things that aren't perfect, and like embracing who you are and working with those flaws and character traits. And then it kind of twists that in one of like the darker scenes of the movie where Woody, in an effort to save Forky, gives up his voice box to repair hers. It works on Woody's side as a character beat in every way. It's just a little bit dark and weird, and I think like a little bit of rewriting could have made it more cogent with what I'm about to dive into. But it works on Woody's side of things. Where it falls apart for me is with Gabby's side, because she does get the voice box, and then she's, thrilled, like, this is gonna solve everything, this is perfect, this is absolutely perfect. And then she goes up to the kid, who Harmony, she's been very much interested in being adopted by, essentially. And the kid still rejects her. So like that continues on with this theme very nicely. I'm like, all right, I'm with it. I'm with it here. I'm a little bummed that they fixed her voice box, because like I felt like it was leaning towards a redemption of accepting who you are type of story. But all right, you know what? If we're going that way, we're going that way. Even if you do find what's wrong with you and you try and fix it, it might still not work. I'm with you. And then it just kind of ends with her finding this lost child and getting picked up and adopted for her. And it's such an unsatisfying resolution, because it's not, there's no thematic reason why she was picked up there, in keeping with the accordance of the idea of finding her forever home, or however you want to phrase it. Like, she goes with Woody and them to go get picked up by the main girl, whose name I'm totally blanking on right now. But finds this kid instead, and is like, this is her. This is who I want to go try and be with. And it doesn't grab correctly. I'm trying to come up with a more coherent way of explaining how I'm feeling about this scene, beyond just being like, well, it just didn't work for me. But it's an element of, she's rewarded for something, but it's never really clear what she's rewarded for. There's never an acceptance of who she is. She just kind of decides that, yeah, all right, I'm fine now, and we move forward. And like, I needed more than that. I needed something that made me feel better about myself, which I know is selfish and weird, but like, that's what movies do. Movies with themes and ideas, they're there to kind of help contextualize your life and kind of find ways to, power through moments that might be bleaker for you. Like, look at tons of people who can tell you stories about this. So like, when this kind of just ended is like, yeah, sometimes it just happens. I'm like, well, that's nothing. That's not any sort of resolution. That's just her being, all right, I'm good now. It's great. I haven't accepted myself. I haven't found who I am. I'm just gonna go do it. Hooray. Roll credits. I should clarify, though, like, as I said, though, this is a very good moment-to-moment type of movie, though. So, like, even in this moment, while unsatisfying as a whole, it got me. Like, I felt emotional about it, because, like, they know how, this movie's very good at setting the mood for it. It knows how to create scenes that make you feel sad. It knows how to tug at your heartstrings. So I absolutely was feeling very much pained as it happened, but like afterwards I'm like, why though? Like, what, aside from the obvious, basically killing a dog type of emotional manipulation, where's the resolution? Why am I so upset at this scene? Because there's no actual follow through on any of it. And that's, why Toy Story 3 and 2 and 1 stick so well, is because there's thematic resolution to everything. And here, this movie isn't going to stick with me in the same way, because this thematic resolution doesn't actually resolve. It just ends. So, like, sure, I got emotional at it, but I don't know why. I can't, like, I do know why, because, like, they know how to play your heartstrings, but, like, it's not emotional in the way that Toy Story 3 ended, with the resolution of a full 3-story arc. It's not an arc resolution, it's just an end.
I mean, don't want to add anything else to this moment because you summed it up fucking perfectly. But I do want to say the only other moment that I teared up in this movie was the very beginning montage that shows like Andy growing up. And even in just like that 2-second clip of Andy giving the toys to Bonnie and like explaining them, like the big tearjerker moment of the third movie, like that feeling like extends across time, that even seeing like a snippet of it was enough to like get me all misty. Whereas there was nothing of that caliber, and I think you've done an excellent job outlining sort of the failings and why not. So
well, here's a final question for you then. Is Toy Story 3 the problem with every millennial's nihilistic existentialism? Because I feel like it kind of is. Because like
no, I don't think so.
Well no. Let me go back. Like, I am half joking.
No, I know you are, but like, all right, lay it out for me. Lay it down.
This is obviously also not about Toy Story 4 at all, but like, there's an element of longing and nostalgia that I feel like the end of Toy Story 3 encapsulates in a way that has resonated with all of us in like just throughout. You know, you put it yourself. It's gonna, that snippet just fucking took you right back and hit you there. And like, there's just such a permeating that feeling, that nostalgia for simpler times is so permeating through us that like Toy Story 3 is like the perfect encapsulation of it. So not so much responsible as much as just like the perfect encapsulation.
So I think this honestly might be, I see what you mean. This might be a Fight Club situation where like Fight Club was made to be like anti Tyler Durden basically, but every edgy teenager on the internet like started like unironically spouting the Tyler Durden memes to the point where like snowflake is now a like legitimately politically used term. I think it's like that, obviously to a much less serious degree, and that Toy Story 3's ending, what makes it so cathartic and powerful is that like I remember like the process of watching that scene, and I was holding together all right. Like it was still really emotional, but like I lost it when Andy sees Woody in the bottom of the box, and Woody finally lets go of Andy, and like Andy, you see it in his face. He's like, "Oh God, like this is like Woody's been with me since the beginning. Like I can't give him up." But then he does it anyway. He like knows that in order to like grow up and be an adult, like, you know, he's got to move forward and like let this kid have her own, like it's better this way than just, you know, clinging on to it. So like, you know, the point is to try and like move on and try and make your own future. But I think I think the filthy millennial audience have gotten too hung up on the fact that the future sucks. I
mean, yeah, it is. Yeah, I was gonna make the same comment about it. Just so fucking bleak ahead.
Yeah, that's why you got to blaze your own trail, and that's why Toy Story 3 is a great movie, and this has themes along those lines, but they don't pan out. It is in the same resonant way. So I really want to watch Toy Story 3 again now, because it's a debate. I've heard people say who have watched all three movies very quickly that Toy Story 3 is not as good as people say it is. They just forget that Toy Story 2 had a lot of the same themes, and I'm terrified if that's the truth. But you got to reach out to the truth. You got to face it. So I got to rewatch Toy Story 2 and 3 in succession.
Yeah, I'm
to see if it's actually a rehash.
I'm definitely gonna go fucking watch these movies again, because now I'm very curious about it and see how much. I can't imagine they don't hold up in at least some capacity, but see how much they fuck me up.
Oh,
I don't know. I guess let's finish this up then. Does this movie justify itself? Like with all of our criticism and comments, does this movie still justify itself?
Yes. Uncertain, yes.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat, because like I think there's definite entertainment value from it, but I think like when you stack it up against the original Toy Stories and like think about how thematically tight they were, it's where I kind of start to hesitate to say yes as much. I think that from pure entertainment value, yes, this movie justifies itself. I don't know. I'm kind of bummed that it didn't hit in the way I needed it to.
I think I'm sticking by it. It meets the bare minimum qualifications in order for it to justify its existence to me, which I think is a separate matter of if it can hang with the big boys of the original trilogy. And in that regard, I mean, it doesn't fall too far behind as far as being a good movie. Like, this is still better than most other movies that I've seen from Disney recently.
It's not a Cars 2.
It's no Cars 2. I'd say it's no Incredibles 2 either. But so in that regard, like, again, it sounds like we're really, really down on it. I think I'm a little less down on it than you, generally speaking. But
I mean, that's mostly
like,
just because I'm really disappointed in Gabby's resolution, and that there's definitely an element of, oh, it didn't work for how I wanted it to that, but
I mean, you laid out your reasoning really, really well, so I can't fault you for that. But yeah, so I think it justifies itself. Does it hang with the big boys? Is it a worthy sequel? That's maybe where I start to go a little bit more.
Yeah, I get that. I was kind of thinking that as you were talking, in the same boat of like, does it justify itself as a movie? Yes. Does it justify itself as a Toy Story movie? Is where the question is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's just get ready for a fucking Lost Toy Story, which is clearly what they was trying to set up at the end there. So,
and so that's the other big, like the other big, like, cynical corporate Disney's grubby claws, like, seeking through the cracks, like how blatantly the, like, hey, we're gonna make a shit ton of sequels about either, you know, the Lost Toys or, you know, Bonnie's Toys or whatever,
or
like,
Bo's time in the fucking army.
Oh God! Oh no, they totally could do like a Toy Story Peace Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. I mean, like, so
we should say it's not going to be terrible. It's Disney. None of the stuff that they do is terrible. It's going to be average. It's going to be slightly above average. You're going to have an enjoyable enough time. You're just going to be left going, all right, cool. I turned my brain off for an hour and a half. That was fine.
It's going to be a vapid collection of entertaining motion images.
Yeah.
Oh, God. All right, here's the best way to put it. At the end of Toy Story 3, the idea of a Toy Story 4 had me offended. At the end of Toy Story 4, the idea of a lost Toy Story makes me feel depressed and old.
Oh, man. #millennial. Oh, fuck me. All right. Is there anything else we want to talk about, or we want to call this here? This is another one where we started off like, hey, let's just talk about Toy Story. And it was like, hey, Sean's been going through like a bad episode the past couple days. How we doing?
That's the show, I guess. I feel like we've been due for one of these.
I mean, we did have a pretty depressive one for a bonus episode last month with
Steel Magnolias. Speaking of which,
yeah.
If you want to listen to our bonus episodes, you should join us on Patreon at the $5 tier.
Hell fucking yeah. But before we talk about that, I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Sean_McKinda. I don't know why I included the twitter.com. You can also find me at twitch.tv/Helpless_Skippy. I stream all the fucking time over there, doing a bunch of cool stuff with that. And I also write for 25yearslatersite.com. I did a big interview with the creator of Skatebird, which is a skateboarding bird thing that came out last week, and it was a really interesting interview. If you have any interest in video games, music, birds, skateboarding video games, physics of video games, man, we talked about so fucking much, and it is a really interesting read. She was wildly fascinating to talk to and it was a great time. So go read that.
Megan Fox, not the actress, but the game developer of Skatebird. Let us know if you've got a movie that you want to talk about. Yeah, I've been Jackson Keller. I haven't done anything nearly that cool recently. I've mostly been selling my blood. But you can find me at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller, where I don't stream, but I do host streams that I'm on sometimes, including Sean's here. We do a lovely Pokemon Nuzlocke run. I will also be joining him, for a special event. It'll be Saturday.
Oh, yeah, I
by
forgot
the time
about
this
that.
episode goes up. Yeah, we're going to do a special, Sean's bringing back Read 'em and Weep, where he plays through a shitty license game of a DreamWorks animated film and has a colorful cast of characters reading the script out loud, a dramatic reading as the background. And so I'm pleased to say I'll be joining this time as the female lead, the lady who fucks the bee in Bee Movie.
Oh, if you want to get in contact with the podcast, you can do so by tweeting at us at BADH_cast. I post some news, updates, stuff like that from that account sometimes. The main way to get in contact with us, if you don't want to do that, is via the Beating a Dead Horse Discord, which you can get access to on Patreon at patreon.com/BADHcast. We have 3 tiers, $1, $5, and $10 tiers. It's just per month. Like, if you just want to get close to us, $1 a month gets you into our Discord, where you can basically reach out and touch us.
Slide into those DMs, brother.
I was gonna make a reach out and touch faith joke, like fucking Depeche Mode songs, but I realized that might be like just a fucking bizarre, obscure reference that literally no one would get. So I said touch us, and somehow it's so much worse. Yeah, so $1 a month gets you access to our Discord. $5 a month gets you access to our bonus episodes. We got a new one coming out in about a week-ish. So keep your eyes peeled there. And $10 a month gets you access to the ability to request bonus episodes. If you got one that you want us to talk about, just be like, hey, here's $10. Talk about the Barbie Nutcracker movie, and we have to talk about it.
What have you done? Someone is absolutely going to request the Barbie Nutcracker movie. But that's not all you get for being a $10 patron. You also get a very special shout out at the end of every episode, like this one right now. Special shout out to Julia, Travis, Autumn Keller, Summer Skaggs, all our wonderful $10 stallion patrons. Thank you so much for keeping the lights on here at the show. Thank you.
Y'all are wonderful. Also, thanks to Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. Great band, Spotify, all that good stuff. Go give them a listen. Also, thanks for the endorsement from 25yearslatersite.com. It's the site that I write for, and they also like sometimes be like, hey, go listen to our podcast and stuff. There's a bunch of really talented, really cool writers over there writing about all sorts of things, from horror movies to regular movies. That's fucking nothing. To TV shows, to video games. They're getting into more and more. So go give them your clicks. There's a bunch of really talented people out there writing better articles than I am. So go read their shit. It's good stuff. As I said, next week we're going to be doing another live episode over at twitch.tv/helpus_Skippy. We're going to be talking about Danganronpa V3, the thrilling conclusion to the Danganronpa trilogy. So stick around for that. There's going to be a Q&A session at the end of it if you want to know, like, waifus, husbandos, all that weeb bullshit. We'll be doing that afterwards. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go